Very delighted to be here as representing your board that leads this organization. We have a great program in store for you today. We have two legendary California elected officials, Senator Bob Hertzberg and Secretary of State Alex Padilla. And we have a program that is packed full of insights, surprises, and lessons learned by people who have done transformational work in the public policy area. It's all happening at a very auspicious moment for the foundation community and for public policy. A lot of our program today is going to explore how our community can interact with government. We'll explore the perspectives we bring as outsiders, the impact we can have as kind of quasi-insiders, and the many creative ways of partnering to get work done. At first glance, philanthropy and government would seem to a lot of us to be natural partners, but not really. While we serve, we care about the same populations. We want to drive impact in people's lives that suffer and are disadvantaged, or in any area, in cultural areas. We do it differently. We work in the same areas, but often we don't know each other, we don't speak the same language, we're not really interacting deliberately. We know partnerships aren't easy. We think about that in our own lives. Friendships, marriages, long work assignments, they all have challenges. Working with people is tough, but we know that's how we get more done. You know, the African adage, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I think we're learning in SCG that we can go further together, but lots of questions come up. And frankly, they are anxiety-producing because this is a new way of doing business. And I can at least speak from our vantage point at my foundation. You know, I'd say it would be fair to say we're pretty conservative. We don't do political work, but we do work that makes people's lives better. And so, for example, in foster care, it's the county's responsibility to deliver that service, but many of us are engaged in a way at the margins of that system. At this moment now where reform is in front of us and we know we can do better for children's lives, the only way we know now we can do that is to step up in partnership with government. But scary. What does it mean? Well, I get stuck. We know bureaucracy is really slow. You know, they celebrate when they get something done in a year. Not that philanthropy is fast, because the business people who are our members know that we seem a little process-oriented to them. It's an issue. Now, what about the money part? We know the government money is this huge amount of money, and, well, first, let's start with the GDP of Southern California. The private sector is really where it's vibrant. Then we've got our little pool of government money, and then we've got the fairy dust that is philanthropy. So how can our little bit of money drive change? We think it can. I think most of us who are here today, well, you're here. It shows you're interested. Doesn't mean you're hip deep in this new kind of work, but you're thinking about it, and we think that's good. We want you to think about it deeper. Ask all the questions. All the questions are good. But like George Bernard Shaw and Robert Kennedy, we want you to not just ask questions, but we also want to encourage ourselves to be fearless in a way and say, we can imagine things that never were. So we can ask the questions of why is it this way? And then we can take the next step, each of us, in our own work and do the why not part and try something entirely different. You know, we talk about failure sometimes in our crowd. The stakes are so high in so many of the areas we're working on that it's worth it to step up and try. And I just want to applaud you for being in this room and for your commitment to making things better. You're doing that. I also want to note that it's an auspicious day for us. The Center for Strategic Public-Private Partnerships, which is housed in the Office of Child Protection, I can almost get it all out, in the county, has been realized. It's a partnership between philanthropy and the County of Los Angeles. At the moment, 12 funders have come together, broad representation, to pool funds, to match the county's funds, to create an embedded link between the private sector and the county around child welfare reform. We're right in the middle of that action as SCG. I'm proud to say that Parsons is part of that. I want to acknowledge Fred Ali's leadership at Weingart for making that happen. That's why I said we're sort of in the system now. The center staff will be half funded by the county, as I said, and by philanthropy. And we're going to come together not as an ATM for the county, but where our two sectors, our silos, can interact creatively and think different. We can combine our expertise to make a real difference in children's lives. So it's a new place, and we're very lucky today to be able to introduce you to our new center director, Kate Anderson. Kate, wave back there. Many of you may already know Kate. She's a longtime child advocate, an attorney. She's worked in the nonprofit sector as director of Children Now. She's worked for several foundations and in the public sector for Congress members Henry Waxman and Jane Harmon. I believe, as I know many of you, that she is the absolute best person to lead us into this next phase of our work in civic philanthropy. Kate, let's give her one more round of applause, and let's be there for her as she experiences some very tough work. This work got started because we all saw problems, and we didn't look for solutions in the usual boxes. We have a lot of questions about creating these partnerships. Let's keep doing that. And to get started, there's a I want to bring up a woman with a long history of forming partnerships and forging solutions, someone who has brought vision and passion to Southern California grant makers, and who has really taken us fearlessly into engagement with public policy. It's my pleasure to introduce the president and CEO, and someone I greatly admire, Chris Essel.
Thank you all. Thank you, Wendy, for very kind words. I think you're the fearless one, frankly, but let's give her a round of applause for being an incredible board chair. She's provided absolutely vital leadership and support to this organization. I also want now to acknowledge the leadership of those of you in the room who sponsored today's conference. And there we have it. Our presenting sponsor is Bank of America. Thank you very much. You'll be hearing a little from them later. Our gold sponsor is California Endowment. Our silver sponsors are the Archstone Foundation, Conrad and Hilton Foundation, and California Wellness. And then our bronze and committee level sponsors are Bank of the West, First 5 LA, Skechers, a brand new member, thank you. Also Union Bank, Fund for Santa Barbara, and the Women's Foundation of California. Thank you to all of you who helped underwrite today's conference. Next, I'd like to thank our operating grant sponsors who, without question, make our work possible. There they are. This, by the way, represents 50% of SCG's budget, so let's give them another round of applause. And thank you to the Conference Advisory Group, whose valuable input helped to shape today's outstanding program. We really appreciate all your volunteer hours. Finally, I'd like to just acknowledge any SCG board members who are in the room already. If you're here, would you stand? I know Chris Hershey's here and Wendy Guerin. Are any of them else? I know we have about a half dozen coming today. More people will be arriving as they fight LA traffic. So for years, the philanthropy community has faced our society's most vexing issues head-on. Your organizations have rejected an unequal, unhealthy, uncaring status quo. You have invested sweat and tears and a whole lot of your resources to foster change, often over long periods of time. Many of you have shown this community that one of the strongest ways to foster that change is by engaging in public policy. You've seen the risk and the reward, and you've taken the leap. And what's more, you've invited SCG to join with you. Your commitment to stepping into this realm of public policy has made it possible for us to take this leap with you as an organization and as a community. Since last year's conference, SCG has debated where and how we can facilitate the most effective interventions in this arena. We've surveyed our membership, we've spoken to experts in many fields, to people who have studied public-private partnerships, to those who have actually formed them. And as a result, we are now moving forward to support our members in addressing homelessness, child welfare, the environment, criminal justice reform, and other timely issues of the day. We are beginning to build our staff, our resources, and our relationships to help you get involved and get things done. This work, let's be clear, is a lot more than helping government just achieve its own goals. When we do our best work, we help to set the agenda together. We expand its possibilities. We leverage each other's resources and each other's strengths. Today, we will look at a number of these partnerships, like the Arts for All Pooled Fund, which for 12 years now has worked hard to bring arts education back to our public schools. The fund includes county arts and education officials along with philanthropy in its leadership structure. Or like Liberty Hills Commissioner trainings, which have reached deep into the community and placed 24 new community voices on city, state, and county commissions over the last 2 years alone. And the Home for Good Collaborative, which has extended the conversation around homelessness to include all the relevant parties, government, business, philanthropy, while engaging with our nonprofits to do the life-saving work of bringing people home. Those are just 3 great examples. There's no single way for philanthropy to approach public policy. And as Wendy mentioned, we are truly excited about beginning our partnership at LA County with the Office of Child Protection. Forming any kind of partnerships means taking a risk. It means giving up the privilege of being an outsider in favor of having a seat at the table. And it means holding our own work to an even higher standard. The people in this room represent a deep bench of talent, and given SCG's full membership, that bench goes even deeper. Part of the reason we've been able to embark on this work is our growing membership. For the last 18 months, we've had government grant makers in our tent. From Los Angeles County, the cities of Los Angeles, West Hollywood, and Culver City, the Corporation for National and Community Service. We also have guests in the room today from the cities of Pasadena, Long Beach, and Santa Monica. Welcome to all of you. Your presence and participation has given us great advantage as we turn towards public policy. Moving in this direction gives us the opportunity to test our collective skills, knowledge, and wisdom on the critical issues of the day as we build trust face-to-face and as we forge alliance between government and philanthropic leaders. Together, we are taking the first steps to become the co-creators of truly transformational change. So let's get started. I'm delighted to introduce our first guest today, former Assembly Speaker and current State Senator from the San Fernando Valley, Robert M. Hertzberg. We knew he'd be a great way to start the day. I can think of no one wiser or warmer to talk about how philanthropy and government can collaborate in California. He and I go back over 20 years or so when I worked, when he first ran for the Assembly. And I worked on entertainment issues back then, and he was always a welcoming figure. He'll give you a hug anytime he sees you. He's a policy savant and a go-to guy who we knew would get things done if he would jump on our issues. What's not listed in his bio is he's spent most of his years in the private sector, and I'm personally thrilled when someone like Senator Hertzberg runs for office because he brings such a fresh perspective to government. We're thrilled that he is able to join us before he has to jet up to Sacramento for the week. Please welcome Robert M. Hertzberg. Do I get a second hug?
Are we on? Oh, good. I'm going to move this chair because I can't stand behind a podium. It's an occupational hazard. I might come down and hug you in the audience directly. But thanks, Chris. And Elise, how you doing, baby? She's the greatest. Thank you. You know, I've spoken here a few times. Years before most everybody in this room has been part of this organization way back in the Wayback Machine. And I came here because what you do is important. And I want to deliver a message that I think is important about my experience in government and my experience in the private sector and what we need to be doing to do better. Because that doesn't mean we're not doing brilliantly. It just means that with the world changing and the rate of change, we always need to do better. Things change at such a crazy rate. So for those who don't know, I served in the legislature 20 years ago. Me and Jerry Brown are the senior guys up there now. It's hard to believe for a guy who looks so young. And I decided to come back after a 12-year hiatus. I traveled the world. I took 2 companies public, worked all over the planet, over 100 countries, and I decided to come back. And I only share this with you to help frame my thinking and to frame the advice that I want to give here today and why I think it's so important. And I came back not because I'm a rat-fink politician who's addicted to the television or to the needle or whatever else it may be. I came back after a serious think, a really serious think. Being away from the flood of the fire hose of government and the decisions that you make, by traveling the world, by having that global experience on the one hand, and having an opportunity to think. And I kind of, you know, it doesn't really directly apply, but it has some attributes to it. You know, after being gone so long, I really was a Plato's Republic moment for me. Money's not my God anymore. I'm not ambitious. I'm ambitious for ideas. I'm ambitious in a completely different way about how we do things. And so I sat down before deciding to run for government and wrote a book for one set of eyes, my own. And the purpose of that book was to engage in a serious think, to pull together all of the thoughts that I've had, the ideas that I've had as I've traveled the world and I looked at street lights or ideas or how roads were done or how public policy was done in Kenya or Ulaanbaatar or wherever else it was, and thought about it. And as I traveled on the plains and I read and thought and took notes, I pulled it all together. And I decided to run for state government because county government, although important, is so much of implementation. It doesn't really fit my mold, who I am. I'm an idea guy. Federal government, I think, is dying. I think it's yesterday's news. I think large units of government don't work as well. And the other thing that I did while I was out of government is I didn't walk away. I believe that everything you guys work on, all the stuff is so fundamental to the underlying architecture of governance. And so I did the unexciting stuff that never gets in the newspaper, stuff that no one ever talks about, but stuff that has gigantic impact. First, redistricting. Now, redistricting drives everybody crazy because of the issue of gerrymandering and politicians, you know, engaged in self-interest. Everybody looks at it as a problem. We put on the ballot an initiative on redistricting for the 5th time, and my involvement, I came back when I was traveling, I still was involved, this was Cal Forward, and we were deeply involved in that process. The notion of 5 major foundations coming together in terms of how do you change the law, deeply, deeply involved. I was co-chair of that organization, took over for Leon Panetta, and changed the law in a way that eliminates a lot of the noise that makes it difficult for all of us to do our work. Second, 50% plus 1 on the budget. Something else we worked on California Forward, I ran around and did 37 editorial boards. Again, the research being provided by the foundations, the thinking being provided by the foundations. Jerry Brown looks like the greatest governor in the world, and I think he's doing a hell of a job, but it sure is a lot easier when you don't have a 3-month delay on a budget and everybody thinks the California's falling in the ocean, and we have these horrible challenges with these budget delays that people have to use warrants and the like. Again, not the kind of stuff that puts you on the front page of the papers, but stuff that fundamentally affects the architecture of power. And again, foundations being deeply involved. Term limits, same thing. Again, coming out of a number of organizations and a number of folks that we did. Initiative process, we spent a year and a half and about $1.5 million with Nicholas Berguen, with the James Irvine Foundation, with a number of folks. We sat down with a group of 64 people convened and helped paid for by the not-for-profit sector, coming up with in the marketplace of ideas of what do you do to fix the initiative process. And one of the things we came up with was the notion of having a right to withdraw, a clawback, so that what happens is these initiatives get filed, and once they're filed, they're on the ballot, there's nothing you can do about them, and it's horrible. And this morning, right now as I'm standing here, Jerry Brown is holding a press conference on the minimum wage. And the only reason he can have that press conference is because the SEIU healthcare workers put an initiative on the ballot, and because of that proposition, because of that initiative reform that Darrell Steinberg carried as a result of 64 groups convened by the Irvine Foundation, Nicholas Bergue, and a number of other foundations, the ideas that were developed in that group resulted in what happened today. 2 weeks ago, we had a dark money initiative Jim Heerwagen was putting on with the Soros family, and the same thing, Common Cause, Business Roundtable, a number of groups supported by Irvine, coming up with ideas, convening people, not in the political sector, but to create realistic ideas by bringing folks together. A gigantically important yet invisible value that the philanthropic community made to that effort. So you're just seeing it right now, and quite frankly, I've been working now for years with Nicholas and a whole host of other people, Nicholas Bergue and my buddy, if you heard about him, the homeless billionaire. If you haven't, you should hear about him. We have this not-for-profit, and we've been hiring the former directors of finance of both parties, the former chief economist for California, have been modeling a whole tax structure to eliminate some of the volatility and challenges that so much affects the kinds of things that everybody in this room cares about. And again, it's the same concept. Over and over, an example of a partnership, not political, but pulling people together, developing ideas, hugely important. I cannot stress to you enough that what happens in government and the great challenges that we have is that government is dominated. We call it special interests. I call it the status quo. This is the CEO of the telegraph industry that is going to every legislator and to his best friend, the governor, telling them that, oh, ladies and gentlemen, if you go to the telephone, we're going to lose jobs for people that teach Morse code. We're going to lose jobs for this. The challenge of a society in general, and a challenge which I particularly want to make of California and the rate which change is happening, is extraordinary. And Sacramento, it's the fight, and I don't say this out of disrespect, it's just as an example, between the nurses and the nurse practitioners, the trial lawyers and the doctors, all those things dominate. But more importantly, those are the things that educate. Because we're asked, I call them the talking points people. The idea is not to get together and to bring people together for an idea to solve a problem. Are you going to support my bill or oppose it? You sit in front of my committee and you're going to give me a contribution next week, and I have to support your bill or not. And if I support your bill, you'll give me a contribution. You might give me an award to make me legislator of the year. But is that really the way to fix the problem? Does that bring all the ideas together? So what do I do as a legislator? I wimp out, I said, fine, I don't care, pass it to the governor, pass it to the other house. I vote for it, I get my check. I don't mean to diminish it, but it is what happens in the best of people, because the marketplace of ideas, the ability to collaborate, is so limited. And so what I would suggest to you, and what the genius of what you do, is not politics, what Wendy talked about, the idea of fairy dust. I wouldn't consider that at all. You are the catalysts. What value you've had in my 43 years of experience in the public space is to be in that space, to be the idea people, to bring people together, to convene, to not necessarily advocate, but I could just giving you some examples after examples. We did it with First Five, a lot of First Five people in the room, with the LA Up program. Annenberg funded a lot of that stuff. A bunch of people funded that stuff. Karen, what was her name, who ran that program? Me and Nancy Reardon were the co-chairs of that, and put this deal together for $600 million to make it happen. But again, it was foundation-driven. It cost $2 million to convene everybody, but we created this program that was pretty brilliant. And so we don't put enough attention to it, and I think that no disrespect to you guys, but I'm here to talk truth to power, whether that's in Sacramento or to you guys. You guys are too much run by the lawyers. You're too much run by the accountants. Bill Hewlett, who I knew when he formed a Public Policy Institute of California, which I served on the chairman of the executive committee of, You know, he would have rolled over his grave if he saw how slow the process was. He'd tinker in his garage. He had dirt under his fingernails. He was somebody who took risks. He was somebody, as Wendy says, I wrote down her word, was fearless. But we're driven by the fear of the lawyers and the accountants and our tax status. And it's wrong. And I'll tell you why it's wrong. Because this is what I learned as I traveled the world. What I learned in California was how brilliant and how important you are to the process. But you have to change your mentality. Government is not a place of ideas. When I served as speaker, I had the energy crisis. I had to go and reach outside of government because I couldn't find anybody in government who could deal with the issue, who understood what it was. When I left the speakership, I went to all the major foundations and talked to them about, guys, you got to get more proactive. Which, you know, because we don't have the resources. Our system is built upon somebody comes up with a proposal because they're a lobbyist. They got to keep their job. They got to come up with some new way to keep their job. We then dominate the system. They give contributions. It's the political industrial complex. We are not an idea factory. Now, I'm overstating my case because there's a lot of smart people that do a lot of stuff. But by orders of magnitude, based upon the size of our economy and the nature and challenges that we are impacting, it's de minimis. It's de minimis. When you go, and it drove me crazy when I was speaker, I couldn't get this done. When you look at the 1,200 staffers that we had, or whatever it was 2,200, I can't remember, any event, what do? They get a bill. The first committee, they summarize the bill. Then they summarize the opposition in support of both sides. They might make a couple of comments, rarely. It goes to the committee. Your personal staff, what do? Summarize what's in the reports. And then it goes to the next committee, and they summarize what happened in the last committee and what was said and who supports and what the letters of support and opposition make. And there's nobody drilling in of consequence into what those deals are. Most of the stuff these people tell you is a bunch of BS because they're advocates and they've got to win. I was a lawyer for 12 years when I was out of government. And, you know, some client comes to you, pays you a lot of money, they got to win. And so you advocate and say what you got to say because you're not thinking about the republic. You're not thinking about the common good. But that's your job, to think about the republic, to think about the common good. And that's my job. And that's what I came back to do, not to play that game. I can't tell you how frustrating it is when people come in my office, the talking points people, and I ask them a billion questions. It drives them crazy because they haven't thought through the public policy area. They don't care about that. They care about winning their point of the day. That's not what we care about. Now, next point, Wendy talked about slowness. I'm sorry, the world's changed. Get a life. The world has changed. Go tell the people, go tell the Annenberg family that used to do TV Guide. All that money that they've given out, that comes from TV Guide. How many people have a TV Guide on top of their flat screen TV? Right? Go talk to the people at Blockbuster or Photomat. And those are the small issues. I'm telling you what I learned, whether it's all around the planet, is the rate of change is staggering. Staggering. I was in China last week. I don't just go talk to the top government officials. I do. I know a lot of people and get a sense of what's happening in the community. It's totally changing. We hear about this stuff of censorship. Humbug. Everybody has the virtual, what's it, VPN, whatever it's called, VPN network. Everybody has access to everything. There is no censorship. None of that stuff exists. North Korea, yes, but most of the rest of the world, no. And the rate of inventions and ideas is staggering. So what does that mean? If we want to have a place where we care about foster care or developing disabled or different education and all these other things, we have to have the money. We have to get the dough. If we don't have the dough, it don't work. You can have all the dreams you want, but it ain't happening, particularly in government or all the kinds of things that we do. So the point number one is, you guys are gigantically important, and be more fearless. Worst comes to worst, you got a problem with the IRS. Get a life. At least you're trying to solve a problem. 2, right? But you are having an impact. But 3, speed to market, speed to market, speed to market. You know, look at what digitization's doing. Look what it's going to do to the future of work. I went and met with the heads of CalPERS, and they hadn't even changed their actuarial tables about how people live, right? We all know how much longer people are living. What does that mean for retirement? What does it mean for all the issues? What does driverless cars mean for people that own parking lots or communities and how we design them? All this stuff is coming, and it's coming like that. So you got to change clock. You've got to put a fire under your caucuses. You have to change, because if you saw, what I see, I'm the guy on the beach in Indonesia, and I see the wave. I see it. I'm possessed by it. I came back to government more impatient than ever, because I have seen the tsunami, and it is coming. And if we do not, as policymakers, get ahead of the game, it's going to take us out. And once it takes us out, it's over. Right? We've got the weather, and we've got a lot of dividends, and people care about this stuff. And we talk about immigrants. Immigrants have very little to do with people who speak Spanish. Immigrants are people that speak Swahili and Hindi and Tagalog and Mandarin and all over the world. There's no place I've been, 100 and some countries, where everybody doesn't know we have a California story, because there's a dream here. There's a magic. That brand gives us energy and makes stuff happen, but it is not forever. And so the bottom line is, if government by its nature is what it is, I'm not criticizing it. I went into it. I jumped into the sewer, okay? Because I think that there's hope. Now, that's what I'm going to kind of close on here. But speed to market is so important. You know, I was looking at my notes here. I said, not only do we not have TV guides, who knows what there's no such thing as blind dates anymore, right? So I want to open up for questions. My quick takeaways are the following. One, that, we need to be as proactive as possible. As Wendy said, we want to be the ATM for change. But it doesn't cost a lot of money, because there's not a lot of people in the idea business. There's people in the advocacy business. The idea business means that the idea and the power of the idea are greater than the power of your near and short-term interests. What drives me crazy about most rat-think politicians who run around and tell you all these great speeches, and they all are so eloquent, and we all have ideas of who those are, the delta between their interest, which is, I want to be president of the United States, versus, I want to solve problems. I've always found, and I think one of the reasons you have the challenges you have today in the presidential race, is people are tired of the amateurs. They're tired of the noise. They're tired of all the lofty stuff. Get it done. Make it happen, and take the risk. Because so many politicians, they put their personal interests and their political ambition above the interests of the republic. So we need to move as quickly as possible, to promote ideas in partnership, because the government is about the status quo. You have to change your mindset. You are not, I think, Wendy, I wrote a term down, quasi-insiders. You're not. Don't think about that. Think about the power of ideas and stand tall with that. They will win. They always win. Second, the rate of change, the tsunami. Change your attitude. Change your speed. 2 years, 3 years is no longer acceptable. It may be for your world. You might get your job. You might continue to get paid. You might have defense for your idea. You may have worked faster than the 3 people before you. I'm sorry, the world has changed. And if you don't understand it, do some more homework. 3, thinking long is the new short-term thinking. Just like the 61 is the new 45. Right? The thinking long is the new thinking short, because it's all becoming short-term. And lastly, and the most important thing, and I would not have done this because I didn't do it for the money, I didn't do it for the frustrations and all the other stuff of going back into government, but despite all of what I said, the most important thing, and the reason why I made this choice to go back into government, is I have hope. I have hope because we are always the poorest predictors of the future. We look backwards to look to the future. We don't look at what the New World Order looks like. We think about the dark side. If you look at the Millennium Project the United Nations did, and you look at water and poverty and energy and the like, and against populations, it's unbelievable how much the globe has improved. It's staggering when you look at the numbers. There's 7.2 billion cell phones in the world and only 7.1 billion people. Go to Africa. Go to Malawi, go all around the world, and people are using these, and they're changing their lives. The fisherman who's off of Mombasa in Kenya, who can call into the market and the 3 different fishing ports with his cell phone and get the best fishing prices. Example after example of real down-to-earth human conditions of where technology is changing it. The hundreds of thousands of people whose lives have been changed in Sri Lanka because they got a solar cell on the roof, and the kid can study because they got a little light that's powered by a solar cell where he couldn't study before. Example after example of things that we take advantage for, but are fundamentally changing the world. So all I'm just saying to you is, not just at that level, but even at California, I think the future of work is going to change dramatically. I think how we have to think about these things are changing dramatically, but it will not happen unless we engage in the big think, and that people like you do not think of yourself as sideliners. I am a citizen of this place. I have a responsibility. I have chosen to make less money and to serve the public by virtue of being in these jobs. And then if you look history after history, think about the people in the Revolution, what they had to go through. Think about what their world looked like. We look at it after the fact, and we all celebrate that stuff. Think about the people in the Civil War. Think about what civil rights was like. Go example after example. It's always tough. It always looks good after you succeed. So I have hope. That's the bottom line. Because if you didn't have hope, we all might as well just buy an island and park ourselves someplace in the South Pacific and have a good time. But we got opportunity. We got hope. And the hope, a lot of it, rests with you guys. Thank you very much. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.